Space junk, most likely from one of Elon Musk's satellites, has stopped early risers in their tracks as it streaked across Victorian skies. Scientists predict we could see similar events monthly now, as thousands more are launched into orbit.
The number 144,444 represents a 200% increase in orbital dodges in just 6 months. SpaceX says they are just being careful, but there is a major problem with that explanation. The amount of space junk up there has not tripled, so why has the dodging tripled? When a Chinese satellite came within 650 feet of a Starlink, the tracking companies that work for the military went completely dark. It seems like the rules of space are being rewritten in real time without any public debate or even an honest explanation. Silent collision course. 144,444 maneuvers in 6 months is a number that should stop everyone in their tracks. To put that in perspective, that is nearly 800 times every day that a satellite has to fire its engines to avoid hitting something. SpaceX calls this debris avoidance, but the math just does not add up for anyone paying close attention. Usually, when you see a 200% increase in any activity, there is a clear reason for it. But the population of tracked space junk has not grown by 200% in that same time frame. The U.S. Space Force says they are tracking about 35,000 objects larger than 4 inches. While that number is growing, it is a slow and steady crawl, not a massive explosion of trash. So, if the junk is not growing that fast, why is the dodging happening at triple the speed? See, this is a key detail because each of these maneuvers is not just a small nudge. Every time a satellite moves, it burns precious krypton fuel and shortens its lifespan in orbit. It also creates a cloud of uncertainty for every other operator. When a satellite moves, its predicted path changes by as much as 25 miles for several days. This makes the orbital environment more dangerous for everyone else because they no longer know exactly where that Starlink is going to be. SpaceX claims they are just being extra safe by dodging anything with a 1 in a million chance of a hit. That is 100 times stricter than what most companies do. But even if you adjust for that strict rule, they are still dodging 6 times more often than they should be. It is not that simple, though, because the secrecy surrounding these events is what really raises red flags. When independent tracking companies are asked to confirm these near misses, they go completely silent. These are companies with massive radar networks that can see a softball moving at 17,000 miles per hour. Their entire business is knowing where things are. Yet, when SpaceX complains about a specific encounter, these experts suddenly have nothing to say. It makes people wonder if the satellites are dodging things that are not in the public catalogs. There are still many rumors on the air, but what many can confirm is that the sky is getting crowded with things we are not supposed to see. If you are dodging ghosts, you cannot exactly post the radar data for the world to look at. This creates a massive gap between what the public sees and what is actually happening 60 miles up. SpaceX is now in a position where they are the primary traffic cops of the sky. With nearly 9,400 satellites in orbit as of early 2026, they see more than anyone else. They have embedded sensors on every single satellite that act like a giant eye looking at the void. They recently revealed that they are moving thousands of satellites to a lower altitude of about 300 miles. The reason they gave was safety, but they specifically mentioned uncoordinated maneuvers by other operators. This is huge. They are not talking about rocks or old rocket parts. They are talking about active satellites that are moving without telling anyone. This is where the mystery really starts to deepen, because it implies a level of chaos that the government is not admitting to. We are looking at a situation where the biggest player in space is effectively saying they cannot trust the official data anymore. The shift to 300 miles is a massive undertaking that requires moving thousands of pieces of high-tech hardware. It suggests that the higher altitudes are becoming too risky due to these secret actors. If you are a commercial company, you want your satellites to stay put and do their jobs. You do not want to spend all your time and fuel running away from invisible threats. But that is exactly what SpaceX is doing. They are retreating to a lower shell of the atmosphere where things fall back to Earth faster. It is a defensive move that tells us a lot about how dangerous the neighborhood has become. What most people do not realize is that we are in the middle of a secret war for orbital position. But here is the catch. Because as SpaceX moves down, they are finding that the new neighborhood is just as strange as the old one. The mystery deepens when you realize who is actually controlling the invisible objects. Dark satellite network. Nobody expected this to happen, but the commercial tracking industry has become a wing of military intelligence. In December 2025, a major tracking company called Leo Labs won a huge contract with the government. Their job was not to keep the sky safe for everyone, but to monitor adversarial spacecraft. This means their radars are now focused on finding and following threats from other countries. When they find something sensitive, they feed that data directly into a classified system that the public cannot access. This explains why they go silent when journalists ask about Starlink near misses. They are legally allowed to talk about junk, but they are contractually prohibited from talking about threats. If a Starlink satellite almost hits a secret Russian or Chinese spy bird, Leo Labs cannot confirm it without revealing a military secret. Yeah, about that, the situation with China is especially tense. SpaceX publicly called out a Chinese launch that they say almost took out one of their satellites. They said the Chinese satellite came within 650 feet, which is basically a hair's breadth in space. They were furious and made it a very public incident. However, the Chinese company that launched the rocket said the satellites were already handed off to their owners. They basically said, "It is not our problem anymore." This happened during a 48-hour window when new satellites are drifting into position. It is a perfect time to hide a maneuver, because nobody expects a new satellite to have a stable path yet. It creates a level of plausible deniability that makes it impossible to prove someone was trying to cause trouble. What most people do not realize is that there are loopholes in international law that allow this to happen. Military and experimental satellites do not have to register their exact positions in the same way commercial ones do. They can operate in the dark, legally. This means there are active, functioning satellites up there that do not show up on the apps you use to track the stars. When you have 10,000 Starlinks trying to navigate around these dark objects, you get the chaos we are seeing now. SpaceX is essentially flying through a minefield where some of the mines are moving and some are invisible. This is why their dodging rate is so high. They are not just avoiding trash, they are avoiding a secret layer of the orbital economy. The crazy part is that SpaceX is also part of this secret layer. They have their own constellation called Starshield, which is built specifically for the National Reconnaissance Office. These are spy satellites owned by SpaceX, but controlled by the government. There are over 200 of them in orbit already. Imagine a Starlink satellite gets too close to a Starshield satellite. SpaceX cannot say, "We almost hit our own spy satellite," because the spy satellite's location is a secret. So what do they put in the public report? They call it a debris avoidance maneuver. It is the perfect cover story because it keeps the secret safe while explaining why the satellite moved. So, here is the deal. The 144,444 maneuvers are likely a mix of real junk and secret encounters. We are seeing the growing pains of a sky that is being split between the public world and the classified one. As more countries launch their own mega-constellations, this problem is only going to get worse. China is building their own version of Starlink, and they are not likely to share their data with Elon Musk. This means we are heading toward a future where multiple giant networks are flying blind relative to each other. It is hands down the biggest risk to the future of space travel that nobody is talking about on the news. And get this, the Pentagon is not just watching. They are actively trying to manage this chaos from behind the scenes. But even the military is struggling to keep up with how fast the private sector is moving. Pentagon tracking games. The Pentagon has always been the king of space tracking, but that crown is starting to slip. For decades, every satellite operator in the world relied on the US military's catalog to stay safe. If the Air Force said something was going to hit you, you moved. But SpaceX is now saying that the military's data is high latency, which is a polite way of saying it is too slow. They are claiming that by the time the government warns them about a collision, it might already be too late. This is why they launched their own tracking system called Stargaze. They are using 30,000 star trackers built into their satellites to create a real-time map of every object in orbit. They are essentially building a private version of the Space Force's radar network, but it lives in space instead of on the ground. Basically, SpaceX is saying they see things the government does not. This is a massive shift in power. If a private company has better intelligence on what is happening in orbit than the military, it changes everything. It means SpaceX can detect secret launches or maneuvers by other countries before the Pentagon even gets the data processed. And because SpaceX is a global company, they can share or hide that data as they see fit. Everyone is obsessed with the rockets, but the real power is in the data. Knowing where everything is at every second is the ultimate high ground. If you have that information, you control the traffic of the entire planet's communications. There are still many rumors on the air about what Stargaze has already found. Some analysts think SpaceX has detected experimental craft that have been orbiting for years without detection. The US X-37B spaceplane, for example, is a secret vehicle that stays up for hundreds of days at a time. While people know it exists, its exact missions are classified. If a Starlink constellation is constantly passing by it, SpaceX is getting a front-row seat to the military's most secret projects. This creates a very awkward relationship between the company and the government. They are partners on one hand, but on the other, SpaceX is seeing things it is not supposed to see. And that's putting it lightly, for starters, because other countries are doing the exact same thing. Russian and Chinese satellites have been observed performing proximity operations, which is just a fancy way of saying they are sneaking up on other satellites. They get close to see how they work, or to test ways to disable them. When these satellites get close to a Starlink, SpaceX has to move. But again, they cannot always say why. This is why the uncoordinated maneuvers phrase in their announcement was so important. It was a direct shot at countries that are moving their satellites without talking to the rest of the world. It is a Wild West environment where the fastest gun is the one with the best radar. The thing is, even with all this tech, the risk of a chain reaction collision is real. If two large satellites hit each other, they could create thousands of pieces of shrapnel that then hit other satellites. This is called the Kessler syndrome, and it could make space unusable for generations. SpaceX is trying to prevent this by being the most active dodger in history. But by dodging so much, they might be making the problem worse by creating more uncertainty. It's not that simple, though, because if they don't move, the risk is even higher. We are stuck in a loop where more satellites lead to more secrecy, which leads to more dangerous maneuvers. The crazy part is that we might be just one mistake away from losing the sky entirely. But Elon Musk thinks he has a plan to stop the chaos before it starts. Musk's secret vision. The decision by SpaceX to launch Stargaze under the banner of orbital safety is perhaps the most sophisticated geopolitical maneuver of the 21st century. By offering a free, high-precision tracking system for every object in orbit, Elon Musk is essentially inviting the world to a game of poker, where he already owns the deck, the table, and the security cameras in the ceiling. The catch is deceptively simple. For Stargaze to provide the safety it promises, every other satellite operator, be they commercial rivals or sovereign militaries, must feed their proprietary telemetry and positional data into the SpaceX engine. Musk is pitching this as a global utility, a way to prevent the catastrophic chain reactions of the Kessler syndrome. But the underlying architecture creates a total information monopoly. To fly safely in the new frontier, you must first surrender your invisibility. This creates an immediate and unsolvable friction for national defense departments. For decades, the United States, Russia, and China have played a high-stakes game of orbital hide-and-seek, placing dark satellites in classified inclinations to monitor communications or test anti-satellite technologies. Stargaze effectively ends that era. If a nation refuses to share its data, it risks being blamed for any future collision, essentially becoming a pariah in the international space community. If they do share, SpaceX gains a real-time, high-fidelity map of every sensitive asset in the sky. It is a brilliant business move disguised as a humanitarian safety feature. We are witnessing the pivot from space as a lawless wilderness to space as a managed ecosystem, where the manager is a private corporation with more operational hardware than all the world's governments combined. The implications of this private orbital government cannot be overstated. For 50 years, organizations like the United Nations and the Pentagon have struggled to establish a cohesive traffic management system for space. They have been bogged down by treaties, bureaucratic inertia, and the inherent mistrust of the Cold War. SpaceX has simply bypassed the debate by building the infrastructure first. They are providing the radar, the traffic lights, and the rules of engagement. By choosing to operate their Starlink megaconstellation at a lower orbit of approximately 300 miles, and they have engineered a self-cleaning mechanism into their business model. At this altitude, atmospheric drag is a constant force. If a satellite fails, it doesn't become a permanent piece of lethal shrapnel. It decays and burns up within months. This is often framed as environmental responsibility, and while it is, it also serves a secondary purpose. It forces a high turnover rate that only a company with rapid, low-cost launch capabilities can sustain. It creates a barrier to entry, where the only way to stay in the game is to launch as fast as SpaceX does. As we accelerate toward a reality where 50,000 satellites occupy the low Earth orbit, the sheer volume of data becomes a weapon in its own right. We are looking at a future defined by millions of autonomous maneuvers every single year. The sky will no longer be a static void but a fluid, constantly shifting mesh of metal and signals. This brings us to a more unsettling possibility that military analysts are beginning to whisper about: the shield theory. If you can coordinate 10,000 satellites to move in perfect millisecond synchronized harmony to avoid a piece of debris, you have effectively built a planetary-scale kinetic barrier. A dense enough shell of satellites, capable of rapid repositioning, could theoretically act as a physical shield against incoming ballistic missiles or even directed energy weapons. The Pentagon is not just watching SpaceX because of the internet. They are watching because SpaceX has the only platform capable of intercepting a threat by simply being in the way, controlled by an AI that reacts faster than any human command chain. And this level of control suggests that the orbital incident people fear, a massive collision, might actually be a useful pretext for further consolidation. If a major collision occurs involving a non-participating nation's satellite, the outcry would allow SpaceX to demand mandatory integration into Stargaze. It would turn a private software platform into a global requirement for spaceflight. This leads into the Kessler syringe theory. Some analysts suggest that the density of the Starlink network is designed to be just below the threshold of a runaway debris chain, but high enough that SpaceX alone possesses the computational power and maneuverability to navigate it. In a conflict scenario, SpaceX could theoretically adjust its fleet to create an environment where only their hardened, AI-driven assets can survive the high-velocity environment, effectively grounding the rest of the world's space programs without firing a single shot. Furthermore, we must consider the hardware itself. Each of these satellites is equipped with sophisticated sensors and ion thrusters. While the public is told these are for internet backhaul and collision avoidance, the aggregate data they collect is staggering. 50,000 satellites mean 50,000 viewpoints looking down and out simultaneously. This turns the Starlink shell into a global synthetic aperture radar (SAR) array of unprecedented scale. Traditional spy satellites are limited by their revisit rates, the time it takes to pass over the same spot again. Musk's network provides persistent stare. There is no longer a gap in coverage. If a mobile missile launcher moves in the Siberian tundra or a submarine surfaces in the South China Sea, the network sees it instantly. This isn't just a communication tool, it is a global nervous system. The private nature of this data is the ultimate leverage. Governments are no longer the primary keepers of the world's secrets. They are now forced to negotiate with a CEO to see what is happening within their own borders. The transition to this techno-sovereignty is already visible in how Starlink was deployed in recent conflicts. When a private individual can decide which side of a war has access to the primary theater management tool, the concept of the nation-state begins to dissolve. This is why governments are hesitant. They realize they aren't just buying a service, that they are becoming dependents of a new kind of power that operates above the atmosphere and outside of traditional jurisdiction. SpaceX is setting the stage for a future where orbital territory is more valuable than land. If you control the 300-mile shell, you control the data, the defense, and the path to the rest of the solar system. There is a darker, more speculative layer to this as well. If Stargaze becomes the universal registry for all human objects in space, it also becomes the ultimate filter for things that are not human. For years, the detection of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, has been hampered by the noise of secret military tests and sensor glitches. By creating a definitive, real-time database of every known satellite and its exact trajectory, SpaceX creates a baseline for the planet. Anything that appears on their sensors but does not match the Stargaze registry is, by definition, an anomaly. This gives a private company the first-look advantage on any non-human presence in our orbit. It positions Musk as the gatekeeper of first contact. The data regarding such anomalies would be private property, shielded from Freedom of Information Act requests and congressional oversight. We could be entering an era where the most profound discovery in human history is hidden behind a proprietary user agreement. The push for 50,000 satellites also creates a physical reality that changes our relationship with the cosmos. We are essentially building a Dyson-light shell around the Earth. This shell can be used for more than just observations. There is the kinetic strike theory. These often referred to as rods from God, but miniaturized. Every satellite in orbit possesses an immense amount of potential energy due to its orbital velocity. If a satellite is intentionally deorbited with precision, it becomes a guided projectile. While a single Starlink unit is too small to cause a city-level disaster, a coordinated pulse of 100 satellites hitting a specific location would have the impact of a tactical nuclear weapon without the radioactive fallout. The sheer number of units makes this a distributed weapons system that is almost impossible to defend against. You cannot shoot down 50,000 targets. As we look up at the night sky, the moving dots are no longer just symbols of human ingenuity. They are the nodes of a new grid. The secrecy surrounding the internal logic of these maneuvers, the black box of the SpaceX autonomous avoidance system, is the ultimate shield. We are told the maneuvers are for safety, but we have no way to verify that 1,000 satellites aren't repositioning to optimize a surveillance angle or to block a rival signal. The transparency offered by Stargaze is a one-way mirror. We see what they want us to see, while they see everything. The next few years will determine if the lights in the sky are a guiding path for humanity, or the bars of a very expensive, very high-tech cage. Space is no longer a place we go to explore. It has become the infrastructure of our daily lives, managed by a power that answers to no voters. When the lights finally turn on, we might find that the room isn't just crowded, it's already been claimed. If SpaceX is already dodging ghosts and building its own private space force, who really owns the sky? Is it the nations that claim it, or the man who launched the most satellites? Let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the curve.